I want sentiment to be shown to me through 300 pages of more, mainly through subtext. Hello, welcome to this video. It's so nice to have you here. My name is Rhianna and today I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in April 2026. So I read a total of 11 books in April 2026. Like usual, I read a mixture of literary fiction and a fantasy. I read a lot of books that were around 3 out of 5 stars, but I also read a series which has become my new favourite series of all time. And I would love it if you would let me know the books you read in April, what was your favourite book you read in April, or if you've read any of these books before and what you thought about them. That would be nice. Anyway, let's get on with the video. So my least favourite book of April 2026 is What You Are Looking For Is in the Library by Michiko Aoyama. So this book follows a series of characters who are all a bit dissatisfied with life, and they all end up being more satisfied with their life through going to the library, hence the title What You're Looking For Is in the Library. And I do love a book that is promoting the power of books and how necessary storytelling is. However, my main gripe with this book and why it just isn't really one I enjoyed that much is that it was all very surface level. It didn't go that deep into any of the themes. And I've heard people say that they quite liked this, that they don't always want, when entering a novel, to be faced with these big themes about life and death. Sometimes they just want something a bit easier, a bit simpler, that they can just have fun with. But for me, I'm always looking for a book that goes really deeply into topics. I don't want anything surface level. I want sentiment to be shown to me through 300 pages of more, mainly through subtext. And there are some nice quotes in here, like, in a world where you don't know what will happen next, I just do what I can right now. But this book made me think about Simon Sinek. If you don't know, Simon Sinek is a guy on LinkedIn who has some interesting points, but in general, the things that he say I find often quite generic and derivative. For example, one thing he posted on his page is, "We have to dream. How else will we make a future that does not yet exist?" And 27,000 people liked it. A lot of people gained a lot, evidently, from this quote. But for me, something like this, a quote like this, doesn't do anything for me, because it just feels empty, because it's not, it's like I can read that and think, oh, that's nice, but then I'm moving on with my life. It doesn't affect me in any way. And not to come for Simon Sinek, but this book made me feel similarly to those kind of quotes. And the library is full of a vast array of books. It's sometimes, actually all the time, overwhelming by just how much there is to read and how many great things there are to read. And it just felt like this was just an average book, and it was fine. Okay, moving on. Next is Nettle and Bone by Kingfisher. This is a fantasy book inspired by fairy tales, and it's about a princess who seeks to save her sister, who is also a princess, who's been forced into this unhappy marriage, and the sister wants to save her sister from this unhappy marriage, so she sets out on a quest in order to do this. And I thought this was a fun fantasy story, but in the end it did feel quite derivative of other things. I think that is because it is inspired by fairy tales, and fairy tales have been done a lot, and I do think it's quite hard to write a story inspired by fairy tales and make it feel original. And I think if you're writing a fantasy novel where the possibilities are endless, in theory it should be quite hard to make your reader feel bored. And part of the reason that I was bored might be because of the protagonist. I didn't quite gel with her. She's in her 30s or 30, I believe, but she very much reads like a teenager. And I think the reason I didn't love this is also down to taste. So this book is written like a fairy tale, and fairy tales are often written in quite a simple way. You know, once upon a time there was a man, he did this, he did that. And this novel isn't quite that, but it does have elements of that where I felt like I was being told the story rather than shown it. But this did win the Hugo Prize for Best Fantasy Novel. This one might just be down to taste. If you do enjoy a fairy tale fantasy that is both cozy and dark, maybe give it a go. The next book is Hungerstone by Dunn. So we all know the story, Dracula, one of the most famous vampire stories ever written. And Dracula was actually inspired by a novel written at the end of the 1700s called Camilla. And I'm very interested in like the history of vampires and vampire stories, because I just think the concept of a vampire is very interesting. The fact that they live forever, but in order to live forever they usually have to cause harm to others. I'm always interested in the moral ambiguity of wanting something good but having to do something bad in order to achieve it. Arguably being immortal is not good, but I would love to live forever. Like really, if there was an immortal serum, I would definitely take it. So yes, this novel is a retelling of Camilla, and there was a lot I liked about it. The first thing I liked about it was the narrative voice. I really enjoyed the main character's perspective. This novel, if you'd have told me it was written in the 1800s, I probably would have believed you. It's written in the style of something like Rebecca, which is one of my favourite books of all time. If you enjoy Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, I think you might enjoy this one too. I also really enjoy stories of a character going to some manor house in the countryside and there being some mystery there. Whenever that's the premise, I'm all over it. But I think why I didn't love this book is because it did just feel quite similar to other things I've read. Earlier in the year, I read Mexican Gothic, and I thought that this book was a really unique spin on that trope of a woman going to a manor in the countryside and there being a mystery. Mexican Gothic surprised me and went to places that I wasn't expecting. I was really compelled to keep reading. But with Hungerstone, once I was 50 pages in, I could have told you exactly where it was going and what was going to happen. And so as a consequence, I wasn't like, wow, this is so great. I'm so like, I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's going to happen next and that's going to happen next. Like I can see where it's coming, where it's going. So I think maybe it needed a few more red herrings, a few more like hints of what could happen, so that I'm left guessing a bit more. But ultimately, a good book, but just not a great one, as so many books are. Next is Antarctica by Claire Keegan. This is a short story collection. Claire Keegan is most known for her novel Small Things Like These, which was made into a film starring Cillian Murphy. And I really love this book. I also love her short story / novella So Late in the Day. I really enjoy how succinct she is with her writing, and also how she makes the reader try and read between the lines. She doesn't tell you everything. And as we've established, I enjoy that in a book. And I really loved the first story in this collection called Antarctica. This is a 5 out of 5 star story, short story for me, because it left me pondering many things at the end of it. It's about a woman who is married, who meets a man at a bar, and then their relationships takes a weird turn. But I found the rest of the stories in the collection weren't quite as memorable. The turns in which they took were a bit more predictable. And I think because I loved the first short story so much, I was waiting for another story in the collection to give me the same kind of feeling, and it just never happened. And I have to compare it to a short story collection I read last month, which was Stone Mattress by Margaret Atwood, and each story was so distinct and individual, and it's really a masterclass in short stories. And for me, like, comparing the two, Stone Mattress is definitely the superior. Next we have Flesh by David Szalay, which won the Booker Prize 2025. I made a whole video about my thoughts on this book because I hated this book when I first started it. The first 100 pages, I was like, what is this? I can't connect to it. I'm not having fun. I don't want to read this. How did this win the Booker? And then by the end, I was crying, and it's become something I think about daily, and is maybe not a favourite book, but definitely one that I think will stay with me for the rest of my life. It's made such an impact on me. I keep thinking about it all the time. And maybe also because I live in London and a lot of the book is set in London. They mentioned Ilford and Stratford and Battersea Park, places that I know really well. And so when I go to those places, I think about the book. And this book is about a man's life, really. And it's about significant and also less significant moments that occur throughout his life. And throughout the reading process, you're trying to find meaning in things, and you're also trying to work out where the story is going to go. And it constantly surprises you in the turns that it takes. But one of the things that is very polarizing about this book is that it is the writing style. It's written in a very show, don't tell kind of way, which I think is why a lot of people don't like it and are maybe quite surprised that it won the Booker, or maybe quite angry that it won the Booker. But there is a reason that the writer chose to write like this, which I thought was very clever. And yeah, it made me sob, made me cry. So it made me feel something. Next we have Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This is a retelling of the Iliad, and it's from the perspective of Briseis, who is the slave to Achilles. And I have never read the Iliad, which I probably should have done before reading this, but I didn't. But I imagine in the Iliad, Briseis is quite a side character, and in this she's very much brought to the forefront. And what I appreciated about that is I think there are a lot of stories of women from the past which have been completely eroded, because usually the tales of war are about the men that partook in the war, but there are a lot of women that were sold into slavery, that had lots of bad things happen to them as a result of those wars, and the stories about them are not often told. So I liked how it was shining a spotlight on that particular subject. But what prevented this book from being a 5-star read, because it was really nearly, I think this is a 4.5 out of 5-star read for me, was that we don't just see from Briseis's perspective, we also see from Achilles' perspective. And in my opinion, we didn't need that. I think the whole story should have been from Briseis's perspective. I think she should have stayed steadfast on that mission. And I understand that seeing from Achilles' perspective gives us more context. It connects us more to the Iliad story. But I think we could have seen that story just through the eyes of Briseis. We could have found some way around it, I think. So if you're interested in Greek myths, and also history, this is a mixture of Greek myth and history. I believe the Trojan War actually occurred, but of course Achilles with his godlike powers probably didn't. Next we have a string of Elena Ferrante books. And I think I am making my way slowly through everything she's ever written, and I will make a video about Elena Ferrante and all the things I've read. But for now, what I read of her in April, my least favourite of the things I read by her in April was The Lion Life of Adults, but it's still 4.5 out of 5-star read for me. This novel, it's all about adolescence, going from childhood into adulthood. That's what adolescence is. And I think, in my opinion, Elena Ferrante, she sat down and was like, I want to write about adolescence. And that's what she did. You could say that not a lot happens in this book, because we're very much focusing on the main character, her mum, her dad, the people around her, and just her living her life. I have a story about human nature and just living an ordinary life, but that being in itself quite extraordinary. And a part I liked in this novel is where the main character is deciding whether or not she believes in religion or not, which I think is quite a universal experience to have during your adolescence. And it very much related to the main character's difficulty with believing religion because of the horrors that happened in the world. And I very much remember feeling very similarly during my adolescence as the main character did. And I think why this isn't a 5-star read for me is because this was the 5th Elena Ferrante book I read, and for me it did feel quite similar to My Brilliant Friend, which is a better book in my opinion. So I think it's worth reading if you're a fan of Elena Ferrante, but I think if you've never read any Elena Ferrante before, My Brilliant Friend is definitely the best place to start. Next, we have my 5-star reads of April, of which we have 4. So first I want to talk about Days of Abandonment by Elena Ferrante. This book is very simply about a woman who's been married to a man for about 15 years, and then he leaves her very abruptly out of the blue, and then she has to contend with her life completely changing as a result of this, and it makes her go into really severe moments of despair and confusion and anger, and she has to navigate those emotions while also trying to be the mother to her 2 children. I think anyone who's experienced heartbreak or any form of grief, anyone who's experienced their life changing overnight like that, would very much relate, I think, to the feelings that this main character feels. I love how we linger on moments. That is my favourite thing that Elena Ferrante does in these books. There is a moment where the main character, she changes the locks on her flat so that her husband can't just come in whenever he wants because he's left. And so she changes the locks, and then the lock gets stuck, and so she's now stuck in the flat. She then finds that the dog seems to have some illness in the other room, diarrhea everywhere. Her son is also very sick, throwing up, very high fever, seems like he might die. Her daughter is playing up, being difficult, and she doesn't know what to do because now she can't get out the flat to get help. And that scene lasted for pages and pages. I had to stop reading because I needed to continue with my life, and I hated leaving the character still in the flat. I wanted to get to the part where she got to escape the flat so she was okay again. And that brings me on to the 3 other 5-star reads of April, all of which are by Elena Ferrante again. And they are The Story of a New Name, Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay, and The Story of a Lost Child. Now, I won't speak about these books in too much detail because I have a video where I talked about the Neapolitan Quartet in quite a lot of detail, but to give you a snapshot of what these books are, they are part of the Neapolitan Quartet. The first one is My Brilliant Friend, and the three that I read in April are the later three. And they follow the lives of Elena and Lila from childhood to old age. And we are basically just following them as they live their lives. Elena is narrating the books, and I love her perspective. I feel like I am Elena, and while I was reading like I was Elena, I almost feel like I lived in 1950s Naples and grew up in that time period and then lived my life thereafter. It was so immersive. I was thinking more about Elena's relationships than I was about my own. I was thinking about Lila as if she was my true friend in real life. I think that's why I loved these books so much, because they really transported me to another place. I really got to escape my own life for a while and just live within the pages of these books. This is the most amount of escapism that I've ever felt while reading. And I just became obsessed with these books at the beginning of April while I was reading them. I had such a wonderful time. Well, I couldn't really do anything else in my life. Well, I had to work and eat. But whenever I was doing those things, I generally just wanted to be reading these books. Okay, so those are the 11 books that I read in April. Thank you very much for watching. It really means a lot, and I will see you in another video soon. Bye bye.